Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the I Hope They Hear This podcast, and we have a third-time visitor, Mr. Andy Eun.
I'm honored.
He is the director of the Daniel Prayer Garden. He is host of the Nabi Design podcast, a great podcast, by the way. If you haven't seen it or listened to it, please go check it out. I've been really enjoying it.
Wow.
The only episode I haven't listened to is your latest one.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's on my list.
Very cool.
Yeah, the one with the one with Abe Jin.
Yes.
That was really good content, but what was kind of surprisingly interesting was, you know how like there's like interference like near the end,
Yes.
and you realize it's because of your microwave. That was so crazy. I was like, whoa.
Yes. I'm figuring out all the kinks. Yep.
Yeah, but I was a guest on your podcast as well.
Yes.
That was kind of a part 2 of our anxiety live coaching session.
Yep.
So if you enjoyed the last one I did with Andy, please go check that out because it's really just a continuation of that.
Yep.
And it was an amazing time for me. So thank you.
I loved it, bro. Yeah.
So today, the reason why I asked Andy to come is because there's been something on my mind. As a Korean American in Atlanta, I would say that we are part of the kind of the second generation.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
the majority of the people that immigrated from Korea to America that landed in Georgia
Yeah.
are our parents' age.
Yeah.
And so the offsprings of that immigrant wave, the second generation, we are a part of that.
Yeah.
Right. So we're, as a community, kind of navigating through how do we wrestle with our given culture, like birth culture, right? Korean culture, and the culture that we find ourselves in, which is the Western American culture. And there's a specific culture that I hold or specific aspect of the culture that I hold dear to my heart. I guess we'll call it the Hyung culture.
Yeah.
And you actually talked about this on the KTL podcast.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about it since you guys talked about it on that podcast. And yeah, I think. So before I get into my perspective on it, I guess let's kind of talk to the people about what Hyung culture is.
Yeah. I mean, obviously if you're listening to this and you are Korean, you probably already know and have experience just through your life of calling older, male figures Hyung, and if you're a girl, you call them oppa. For younger girls, for older girls, it would be, nuna if you're speaking from a male, or it would be 언니, right? So really, for me, I guess Hyung culture is kind of a branch out of our hierarchical Confucian culture, which obviously I wouldn't say venerate, but I would say respects or honors, right?
Yeah.
Older people.
Yeah.
That obviously going for adults, those who are older than you, but that even applies to people within the same generation,
Right.
and someone that would just be older than you. So yeah, so for me, I would say that's kind of a snapshot of what Hyung culture is in a nutshell. I'd say for me personally, just life experience, I am the younger brother. I'm the second child out of 3 boys. So in actuality, I know what it means to have a Hyung, right? My older brother.
Right.
And I know what it means to be a Hyung, right? So I have a younger brother. And so for me, it was kind of embedded in my life. I would say actually my parents were never super keen on us always using the language. I mean, internally as a household, my parents would refer to my older brother when referencing me as Hyung. So it was encouraged, but it wasn't like enforced. But I think I always, my older brother being 3.5 years older than me, I think I always treated him and I respected him, and I actually looked up to him, as a Hyung. And so, yeah, that would be kind of a quick picture, I guess, for me of what it is.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting is depending on the gender of the speaker and also the person that they are referencing, the terminology changes, right? Like you alluded to, 누나, 언니, 오빠.
Right.
And I think I always thought that was interesting because those titles also bring about kind of a different twist to the relationship, right? Because a Hyung, like you are my Hyung, right? 'Cause you're like 2 years older than me, so I would call you Hyung. But my wife calling you oppa, like that would be kind of a different relationship,
Different nuance.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's the same kind of baseline,
Yeah.
like with the respect,
Yep.
but there are differences slightly in how that relationship really manifests. Because
I would even say it evokes different emotions.
yeah. Because for example, with the Hyung relationship, I always kind of think of the Hyung treating the 동생 or the younger brother. It would be more of tough love, like trying to get you to man up, quote unquote, right? Whereas in the oppa relationship, you would treat the 동생, the little sister,
Yeah.
more with kind of a protective love.
Sure.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Does that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And another interesting thing about the Hyung culture is it actually, in America, it's kind of rude to ask someone how old they are, right? In some,
More or less, yeah. Or it's kind of awkward.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Korea, it's supernatural.
Right.
Because you have to establish that relationship.
Yes.
Am I your Hyung?
Yeah.
Are you my Hyung? Or are we peers? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing I'm hoping that the Caucasian or the non-Korean listeners understand is that when a Korean person from Korea asks you how old you are,
Yeah.
it's not a rude thing.
Right.
Yeah. It's that's part of the Korean culture.
You know, I remember like just multiple times in my life, I would ask, whether it was a white friend or even African American friend, hey, were you born in 86? And they would look at me kind of weird. They're like, yeah, I was born in 86. Like, why are you asking me what year I was born, you know? And I was like, just wondering, man, you know? But yeah, so yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and that's also a difference too. Koreans find it natural to ask what year you were born in.
Right.
But in the Western culture, it's more about what is your age.
Right.
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 And this is my theory. I think it's because in the Hyung culture, you're supposed to call someone Hyung if they were born in an earlier year than you.
Sure.
Even if the age difference is like 11 months, if you're
Right.
in the same year,
Right.
there's no obligation. But in the American culture, if you ask simply your age,
Yeah.
then that can get kind of confusing, right?
Right.
Depending on what time of the year it is, doesn't really reveal what year you were born.
Right.
Is that right?
I don't necessarily know if it's right, but it sounds right to me.
Yeah. Because I think even a year difference is a big thing in the
Korean culture.
culture.
For sure.
Here, it's almost like, what? Only a year difference?
Yeah.
You can just be peers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, definitely, I think, here in the States, especially among second gen, it's definitely diluted. I mean, when I lived in Korea, I mean, you could definitely see, that question a little bit more pronounced. But definitely, I spent most of my time growing up here in the States. And so it was something that was a part of our lives, but I would say we definitely had a Korean American expression of it.
Yeah.
Right. So we had Korean aspects of it, but it had like an American twist on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's actually the major bulk of what I want to talk about today.
Okay.
So we kind of talked about what the Hyung culture is supposed to look like,
Sure.
what it's meant to look like in Korea.
Yeah.
I mean, because some of the stuff that we can also talk about is we talked a little bit about how there's sort of responsibility that lands on the Hyung.
Sure.
But from the 동생, from the younger brother or sister,
Yeah.
there's a little bit of, I don't want to call it servitude, but a little bit of obligation to want to serve,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you kind of receive that protection, that taking care of
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the symbiotic relationship between Hyung and 동생, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's okay if I just
No.
start sharing on
Please.
this, but I would say, the typical, I guess, would be exactly what you're talking about, right? Would be if you're older, then quote unquote, right? You are somewhat obligated, culturally obligated to take care of, the one who's younger. And then, like you said, the younger one would have kind of a different quote unquote cultural obligation.
Right.
I would personally say this. I would say, just in my own journey, this is just totally subjective. I would say I've really tried to discover the essence of it and try to throw away some of what I would just call the garbage of it and really retain what it meant to be. Because I'll just be honest, right? Like, as a Korean American, growing up, who definitely identified way more with the American side of myself, it wasn't until I was maybe 18 later in my 20s that I actually had this renaissance of Korean culture and an interest and a desire, to really not only learn but immerse and embrace, right? So I would say for me, I would say this. I would say, in my opinion, I think the essence of what Hyung culture is supposed to be is that as someone who is older, you do have this powerful or beautiful, I mean, I'd even just say that word, right? Because that's what it means to me. You have this beautiful obligation to see someone who is younger, and you're not lording it over them. I think that's what I want to make clear, because
right.
I think that's part of the garbage of it,
Right.
It's like kind of this like lording over, because at the end of the day, human nature, no one wants to be lorded over, right? We just reject that in the fabric of our being. But I would say what I think it's meant to be is, as an older, brother or sister, you want to take care of that younger person, right? Whether it is like just taking them out for a meal, or whether it is more on an emotional level, just being like, hey, how you doing? Like, what's going on with you? And what I've noticed in my life is that I think it's a beautiful relationship, and I feel like on the younger person's end, they get to be a recipient, right? And I also want to say this too. It's not that the older person always knows more, because that's not the case either. Like, really, right? Like, that's not always the case, is that they somehow know more, but it's actually engaging in the relationship in a way where you get to be almost someone's younger brother and be the recipient of that care.
Right.
And then I think even likewise, I would say some of the maybe traditional stuff that I've gotten rid of is, it's not that the younger brother or the younger person just becomes a recipient and has to listen to whatever the older person says. I think that's part of the garbage of it again. But I think in being a recipient, you also get to reciprocate a different type of love back to the older person as well. I don't know if any of that, I hope that made sense.
No, yeah, for sure. And when you say the garbage, I think those things kind of naturally grew in the kind of corrupt hearts of humans.
Yes.
Just because the system is there, right? But I think the system
Yeah.
is meant to be exactly what you're describing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I almost feel like you get glimpses of it. I hope this makes sense. I feel like you get glimpses of it when you watch certain Korean movies. And for me, it was also when I would start traveling to more of the countryside of Korea, right? I'd get out of Seoul, I'd get out of the big city, I'd go to, Gwangju and these other places. And you interact with these people, whether they're relatives or just people that you meet. And you actually do see something really pure and beautiful. You know what I'm saying? And so I would just say that's kind of for me, it was different glimpses of what I felt like were more the essential things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for sure, like, man, I wish they showed more of it in Parasite.
Yeah.
Did you watch Parasite?
Oh, of course.
Because there is a potential to show that relationship with the Kim family's daughter.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, you know how the older brother has a friend that comes over.
Yep.
She still calls him oppa.
Right.
Which the direct translation is older brother.
Right.
They're not blood related.
Right.
But I'm sure if they were to have explored more of that relationship, he would have treated her as if she were his own, blood sister.
Right.
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 Because there's something special there too when it's the actual younger brother of a friend or younger sister or brother of a friend of yours. You kind of just like take that on.
Yes.
Take that responsibility on. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that was my upbringing. Like, I joke around and say, like, during middle school and high school, like, I was raised by 7 older brothers. Like, my older brother ran with this pack of Hyungs to me.
Yeah.
And that was very much what it was. Like, I literally felt like I had 7 older brothers.
Yeah. And I guess there's a little bit of this as well in the Western culture, where if you were to see your older sibling's friend, they might want to take care of you a little bit.
Sure.
But I think there is something much more concrete and real
Yeah.
in the Korean Hyung culture.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I would go out to a restaurant and I would see one of my older brother's friends, they would pay pay for the meal that I'm having,
Yeah.
or just try to find ways to take care of me. Say, is everything going all right? Do you need a
Yeah.
ride?
Yeah.
Those kind of things,
Yeah.
that going that extra mile as if they were actually my blood siblings.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, it's so good. Yeah, I just this thought just popped up to me was there's this word in Korean called chung. Some would translate it as loyalty. What would you translate chung as if you had to try?
I would say a bond that okay. So there's a movie called "To All the Boys I Ever Loved."
Yes.
P.S. I Still Love You on
Yeah.
Netflix,
Yeah.
and I haven't seen the movie yet, but
Yeah.
I saw the clip. She actually tries to explain what Chung is
That's
to her
right.
Caucasian friend.
That's right.
And I think that's what's influencing my answer right now, because I think she actually does say a bond that can't be severed, right?
I I'll agree with you.
Something
Yes.
along
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
lines.
Yeah.
But I think that resonated with me because that's
Yeah.
what I would say as well. There's something, yeah, there's something, some sort of deeper level of connection.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, for sure. And I actually like that definition. I mean, the reason why I bring up chung is because chung is one of those golden treasures that I feel like I found in our culture, right? And to be able to put a word around it is helpful, right? It
Yeah.
helps us to articulate it. But for me, yeah, chung is like this sense of bond. I would say bond would probably be a better word than loyalty. But the reason why I bring up chung is because I would say that chung is something in our culture that kind of permeates or maybe should permeate our relationships, right? I don't know if I can say this, but I kind of feel a sense of chung with you.
Yeah, no,
You know what I mean?
likewise.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like even when we first connected, before I even knew you were a shin.
Yeah, that's
You know what I'm
right.
saying?
That's
I
right.
was just like, yo, there's this chung with you. And the reason why I bring up chung again is because I feel like it's chung that permeates even the Hyung 동생 relationship that should.
Yeah.
And when you have that, I think that's when you kind of find what it was meant to be. And so yeah, like it is hard to describe, but we and I would say Koreans aren't the only one who have chung. I think there's different cultures that have different words for it, but I would say it's that part of our culture where it's like you can't really describe it, but there's just a bond that you have with someone and you feel this nearness.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Fun fact.
Yep.
Your mother's maiden name is Shin.
this is true.
And in Korea, there are 3 major branches of Shin.
This is true.
And we are from the same line of Shins.
Yes.
So we literally have common ancestors somewhere down the line.
We do.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
do. Yep.
That was really interesting when we found out. Yeah. Yeah, I think another thing about Chung is that it's kind of hard to find in the Western culture because, well, I don't want to say it's hard to find, but it's not as common because the Western culture, the philosophy is more individuals, right?
Yeah.
Like, what can you do that makes you happy,
Yep.
makes the self happy?
Yep.
Eastern philosophy is almost the opposite of that.
Yep.
Well, how can you, make the family happy? How can you make the whole happy?
Yeah.
Even if it's not immediate family, it
Yeah.
can be community,
Yeah.
people around you.
Yeah.
So I think maybe there's something there. And I think that's also why, I guess, shifting to the next topic or
Yeah.
the next segment,
Sure.
whatever we want to call it.
Yeah.
I think that's why there has been what I want to call a willful deterioration of Hyung culture amongst second generation Koreans. Because we've come to this place where we have to somehow try to, mesh together this individual's happiness kind of
Yep.
philosophy with what we're born with, which is how do you make how can you behave
Yeah.
and act toward the happiness or wellness of the family or the collective, right? So the current state of Hyung culture that I see
Okay.
in Atlanta amongst the second generation Korean Americans is almost non-existent.
Wow.
Now, I think it's on the verge of going extinct.
Wow.
And
I think a lot of people would actually agree.
yeah,
Yeah.
that actually makes me super sad.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm one of those people who thinks that we should preserve that. What are your thoughts on that? Am I kind of giving an accurate depiction of?
Well, I mean, again, it's a subjective perspective, but I would say, I would agree. I think many others would agree. it's funny because I was going to ask you, right? I was like, why does the deterioration make you sad?
Yeah, I think it's because it's almost our birthright to have this Hyung culture.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful when you see it happen well. I mean, I've also experienced and seen it happen horribly,
Right.
where the Hyung is taking advantage,
Right.
or even the Dongseng is taking advantage.
Right.
Right. The Hyung can take advantage by almost treating the Dongseng as a servant.
Sure.
Right. Go do this for me,
Yeah.
or give me the best stuff because I'm your Hyung.
Right.
Or the Dongseng might say, "You're my Hyung, so you pay for all my meals. You do all these things for me."
Yes.
Yeah. So on both sides,
Yeah.
when there's like malicious intent,
Yeah. Yeah.
it can go bad. But you used the phrase on the KTO podcast, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater,"
Right.
because the Hyung culture, I think, is very beautiful when it's done right.
I would
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
It's funny, man. Like I sometimes I just get like word pictures, or I get pictures that just help me describe like realities. And for me, whenever I think of like Hyung, and the power, the beauty of it, I think of, you actually alluded to it. It's like the older person actually denying themselves, or maybe not even just denying themselves, but wanting to give the best thing to the younger brother. You know, and just quick shout out to my older brother. I don't even know if he's listening, but you know, I actually have a lot of memories like that where, you know, I would witness and see like my brother saying like, you know, give the best thing to Andy because like I want him to give that, you know.
Yeah.
So that, yeah. So, you know, for me, I would say I think you're right. I think from like a landscape perspective, it does seem like it's on the verge of pretty much the extinction. I guess for me, I kind of want to maybe dive in a little bit as to maybe why, and then maybe try to galvanize that a bit, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would say probably everything you're saying is right, David, is I would say there's probably a great bulk of people who have seen the misappropriation of it. Therefore, it leaves a bad taste. Therefore, you cut it out,
Yeah.
right? That's just human nature.
Yeah.
But I would even say there seems to be kind of a deeper deficit, if I could use that word. And I think it's actually, there's just a lack of a deterioration of Korean culture altogether.
Yeah.
Right. And again, you know, we'd probably spend tons of time to even unpack even why that is.
Yeah.
But I would just say that, you know, first and foremost, the fact that we are Korean Americans who are born here, it is quite inevitable for cultural dilution, right?
Yes.
Like because you are being permeated with this other culture.
Yeah.
And then progressively, as that goes to the third and fourth, it just gets, you know, more and more. So I say there's that, but I would even say, I'm going to try to articulate this well. I would say because there's a lack of culture and there's a lack of even wanting to embrace it, right? And what I mean by that is, maybe this is just my personal purvey, but I feel like I've seen a lot of people, if I really called it for what it is, it's like a subtle form of self-hatred. And it's funny because I actually just recorded a podcast with my friend a couple days ago, which will be released in a few weeks, kind of about this.
Okay.
But we were talking about basically because we're Korean Americans, we all have this common narrative of feeling otherness, right? Whether it's at school, whether it's because we are a part of mainstream culture.
Right.
And whether we like it or not, we kind of subliminally, subconsciously live with this sense of otherness, right?
Yeah.
I would say anyone who's probably listening to this who's a minority will be able to identify with this immediately, right?
Right.
Like a story of otherness. So I think what ends up happening is because of our experiences of otherness, what ends up happening in our subconscious is that we start slowly denying parts of ourselves because we actually want a sense of belonging.
Right.
Right? I'm not trying to say that this is the case for every person, but I would say it's pretty true across the board.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think that's the bigger kind of underlying issue, right? Is at the end of the day, when you look at yourself in the mirror, like, who are you? You know? And can you say that you are actually proud to be a Korean
Hmm.
American, right?
Hmm.
When you think about your Koreanness, what are the first emotions that evoke out of you?
Hmm.
Is it ones of pride? Is it ones of man, I love being Korean? Or if you were being really honest, is it maybe quite the opposite?
Hmm.
So I would say to me, that's where it kind of begins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because I guess it's, like you said, inevitable that that kind of would happen because there are certain things about being Korean that make us stick out like sore thumbs.
Sure.
One big example would be our food.
Right.
Our food is very garlicky.
Sure.
A lot of it is basically rotting vegetables, right? The
Yo,
kimchi is,
even though the white folks be loving it
yeah,
these days.
these days, right? These days. But when we were in high school or middle
Right.
school,
It was not cool.
yeah, it's yeah. So those are kind of, for me personally, I think
Yeah.
some aspects of the food culture of the Korean culture
Yeah.
might be something I rejected to try to seep into the mainstream culture of
Absolutely.
America. So
Absolutely.
yeah, that totally makes sense,
Yeah.
and I can understand why that's happening and why people would even reject the Hyung culture in that, because it's odd to call someone Hyung. Like if I were to call you Hyung,
Yeah.
and amongst a bunch of Americans, they might say, his name's Andy. Why are you calling him Hyung? Right? And
Yeah.
it would be an odd thing. And
Yeah.
like even that relationship from an outside perspective might seem odd.
Yeah.
Like, is he your actual brother? Why
You're
why are
right.
you treating him this way? Like,
Right.
what's happening? Right.
Right.
So I can understand that.
Yeah.
But even with that, I think it's Hyung culture at least. I don't know about all aspects of Korean culture. I think there are certain things like drinking culture.
Sure.
I think we can probably do without.
Right, right,
Like
right.
my brother lives in Korea.
Oh,
And he
gosh.
tells me about how you're basically obligated to go
Right.
out drinking with your superiors
Get
after work.
freaking smashed.
Yeah. You're expected to be at work the day after.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
But at least with Hyung culture
Yeah.
and what it's meant to be,
Yeah.
I still think it's worth preserving.
And I would agree with you. I think I wanted to just share that first, almost as like a kind of as a primer,
Yeah.
maybe for the conversation. But I do agree with you. And again, I don't want to try to be too deep about it. But I do think I would say the underlying premise is actually, what do you even think about your culture first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
But I think maybe from that place, right? Because I think what ends up happening is when you start reconciling with yourself, when you start reconciling with your Koreanness, I think this is one of those aspects that starts to come back up, right? And I just want to say this quickly too, is like, I think one of my mentors said this to me, and it helped me to kind of separate culture like in a very effective way. But he said, Andy, K-pop and K-drama, like all of these things that people immediately associate with Koreanness, he's like, that's actually not pure Korean culture. And what he said to me was, he said, that's actually more soul culture.
That's right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He's saying that is actually Korean culture basically mixed with the world. And that's what you get.
Yeah.
Not to say that there's anything wrong with K-drama. I love some K-drama.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I'm saying? I listen to a little BTS sometimes. You know what I'm saying? I'm just keeping it real. But I say that to say that if that's all that we appropriate as our culture, then I feel like we're missing this depth. We're missing the bottom part of the iceberg, right? And so I just want to say that, but yeah, I would agree. I think that embracing Hyung culture, I think first and foremost starts with an embracing of your Koreanness, right? And I think when that happens, it becomes this real beautiful journey. Like, I'll just share quickly for myself. I mean, for me, and I shared this on the KTL podcast, but for me, actually, there was a holistic kind of reconciliation that was happening to me. And so it's going to sound funny, but I'll just say it quickly. But I actually had almost a spiritual experience when it came to my Koreanness. And it happened through actually listening to a Korean hymn.
That's right.
Right? There was a group of Korean Christians who were singing this hymn that I had heard when I was a kid. My grandma singing it, right? And it wasn't just the fact that it was a hymn. I mean, obviously there was probably a component of that, but it was something about the Korean tongue, the Korean language that almost was like trapped in my bones that kind of like washed over me again.
Yeah.
And I was just like, why do I feel this song is so beautiful? Like, why am I crying? You know what I'm saying? So I would say that, yeah, that was kind of my journey. And I think from that journey, it's been this 15, 16-year journey of like progressively, wanting to, maybe learn a little bit more about my history, living in Korea for 4 years and traveling, different parts of Korea. So I think it's been this journey for me to kind of like, almost like this pilgrimage, so to speak,
Yeah.
of like kind of getting back into my Korean roots. But all of that to say that I think that that's all deeply connected with even Hyung culture, because I do think that if we were to just isolate Hyung culture, I totally agree with what you're saying, David, that it is a really beautiful part of our culture,
Yeah.
and something that I believe, if can be preserved, can be one of those things, and I would even dare to say this, could almost be like our gift to the world.
Yeah.
I don't think we ever really think about that. And again, I'm kind of cross-referencing a little bit from the podcast that I just recorded, but I sometimes I don't think that we realize that there's things in our Korean culture that are actually our gift to even America.
Right.
Like, to me, when that flywheel clicked in, I was just like, it changed everything. Because now it wasn't just the fact that I was proud of being a Korean, but now it was actually, I came to the table feeling like I had something very unique to offer. And that changed everything for me.
Yeah.
And, and I would hear feedback like that from, whether it be older, white guys just being like, man, you Koreans, like, you guys really know how to take care of the elderly. And I would be like, yes, we do.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We got to own that.
yeah. So that would be just my quick little snippet on it.
Yeah, and just kind of thinking about all of society, whether it be Korean or non-Korean,
Yeah.
embracing Hyung culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just see so many great things coming out of it. One funny story, when me and my mom visited my brother several years ago to Korea, me and my mom were hanging out. What's that man-made river that runs through Seoul? I forget the name.
Something get chun.
Yeah. Cheonggyecheon?
Cheonggyecheon, yeah.
Yeah, that man-made, it's like
Yep.
really pretty.
Yeah.
A lot of people hang out
Yeah,
there, right?
yeah.
And I remember there was these two kids messing around. They were still in their school uniforms.
Yeah.
And one kid was playing as if they were going to throw someone else's book bag in the river.
Yeah.
And my mom immediately goes, "Hey, don't do that," in Korean.
Yeah.
And the reason why she did that, even though she would never think to do that in America,
Right.
is because my mom is a generation, maybe
Right.
2 generations separated
Right.
from these kids.
Right.
But she still felt the responsibility
Wow.
as the older person
Yeah.
to say, that's their schoolwork. Don't
Yeah.
mess with that.
Yeah.
Like, take care of each other.
Yeah.
Right. So that just suddenly awoken in her when she was in Korea.
So
And
good.
I said, "Oma, what are you doing?" And she's like, I don't know. But I just did it. And she also said something along the lines of, she was talking to me, I saw you guys in them. Like I felt the maternal instinct
Wow.
to try to help them and
Sure.
like protect them.
Yeah.
So that was just a snippet of, wow, if society embraced this Hyung culture, that's
Right.
what it could look like.
Sure.
Like strangers trying to take care of each other.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom was scolding them,
Right.
but not because she was upset, but
Right.
it's because she wanted them to,
Right.
act proper.
Right. Right.
But there's almost a stigma about getting into other people's business in America.
I was just gonna say that.
Right?
Yeah.
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 So that probably seeped into the second gen kind of
Psyche.
Yeah.
Totally.
And thus, I think, happened the willful deterioration
Yep.
of the Hyung culture.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's just absolutely right. I mean, I think you have a head-on collision of opposing worldviews. And so, to me, I would say that collision can either create chaos or it can actually create what I would say a harmonious sound, right? And I really mean that, right? I feel like the fact of the matter is we are Korean American,
Yeah.
right? So we cannot I was going to use the Korean word posa. Like we cannot like take
Escape.
off. Right. We
Right,
can't.
right.
Yeah. We can't take off our Korean American identity.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is a really cool place that we can navigate.
Yeah.
Right. And I think even when we were on the KTL podcast, that was kind of the hope, is that through this transmission, we would be able to maybe at least spark a conversation or help the navigation.
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, in the States, right, we deeply value our privacy. We deeply value our individual freedoms, which is polar opposite to what they value there.
Yeah.
Right. And over there, it's more about the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think, I'll just say this. I think if we can I'll use this kind of story maybe to highlight this. So I remember I had this moment while I was in Korea. It was actually during seminary.
Okay.
And so in my seminary classes, there were a lot of kind of Korean expats like myself, but there were also natives, those who were born and raised in Korea. And I remember I had this one experience that I was just like, wow, this like stood out to me. So basically what ended up happening was for lunch that day, I ended up going out to lunch with some of my Korean American friends. It was about a group of 4 or 5 of us, right? So go into this restaurant and we're eating, and I'm this weird introvert. I people watch sometimes, so I just kind of take a step back and I observe. And what I was observing in that moment was that the 5 or 6 of us, we were all having individual conversations. You see what I'm saying? So like this, we're all sitting at the same table.
Yeah.
But I was looking to my left, and the 2 people sitting across from each other, they were talking.
Yeah.
The people to my right, they were talking together. But we were not having a collective conversation.
Yeah.
Right? And it didn't hit me, because that's normal, right?
Yeah.
To me. It didn't hit me until later that night, the same day. So 7 p.m. rolls around, and then one of my Korean Hyungs, who I called Hyung, he said, "Yeah, 저녁 같이 먹자, right? Let's go eat together." I was like, "Oh, okay, let's go," you know?
Yeah.
So I just followed him and these 4 other Korean older brothers, and we're all eating together. Immediately, dynamic is completely different. 5 of us are sitting at table, the same type of table that we were sitting at before, but the conversation, it's circular.
Yeah.
Everyone's having one conversation. And I remember, I don't know why, but like as I observed that, it really warmed my heart. I was like, I said, this is so beautiful. I love this. I love having conversation like this. 2, I was like, we're losing this, or we don't even understand this. So I don't know. That's just something that I wanted to.
No, that actually makes so much sense to me now.
Yeah.
I feel uncomfortable when we're like all sitting around the table and there's multiple conversations happening.
Wow.
I never really knew why, but it's because I was born in Korea.
Yes.
I lived the first 6 years of my life there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the way that I model my social interactions is actually through my cousins. On my mom's side, I'm the youngest of all
Okay.
the cousins.
Okay.
So they're all Hyungs and Nunas to me.
Yeah.
And so I take a lot of what I am from my Korean like extended family. So that might be why when I see multiple conversations happening,
Yeah.
I'm always kind of the guy trying to merge the conversations.
Wow.
Or I get confused as to which conversation to join. And
Wow.
I just start getting a headache.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, it's funny, right? Like I think so. Tying all that full circle, I feel like that is a clear picture, maybe, of not only the differences of East and West, but even for those of us who are Korean Americans, maybe we could even look to that aspect,
Yeah.
and to be like, you know what? There's something really like cool about that, or they're
Yeah.
like, I like that, because it makes everyone feel included. It makes for a larger conversation. And so even like using these type of examples to say like, man, how do I practically try to adopt that, in my everyday kind of experience?
Yeah. And when you talked about how when 2 cultures kind of come together,
Yeah.
there can be chaos
Right.
or harmony, right?
Right.
Personally, for me, I feel like I'm observing more chaos
Yeah.
right now because one of the things we talked about before the podcast is I've never actually called you Hyung. I think today during illustrations in this
Yeah,
podcast
yeah.
might be the first time.
Yeah.
And that's because I'm not sure how to navigate this kind of morphed or maybe even mutilated version of Hyung culture,
Gotcha.
right? I don't know if I have to ask your permission because the sense that I'm getting now is really you can only call someone Hyung if you came up with them. Like you called them Hyung when you were younger,
Sure.
and so it's weird. Like Namu Hyung,
Yeah.
he's your friend,
Right.
same age, right?
Right.
I
Similar.
call. I mean, I've called him Hyung since I was in high school, so I keep calling him Hyung.
Wow.
But all the people that's the same age as him or even older,
Sure.
if I've met him now, like
It's awkward.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm allowed to call him Hyung or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and it's funny. I really don't have an answer for that. But I would just say this is that I was saying this to you pre-show.
Yeah.
I was saying how the funny thing about that though, David, is the fact that I feel that from you. So even though you don't call me Hyung, which to be honest, I really don't care for in the sense of like whether you do or not makes no difference to me. But I feel your, if I could call it your 동생 energy towards me. And maybe in response or even before that, I would say, I don't know if we're getting too mushy right now, David, but I've always, ever since I've known you or connected with you, I've always wanted to reciprocate that Hyung energy, like for what reason,
Yeah. And I felt that and received that as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I like you so much, because you are one of the people who, even though we've never really defined it as such, it was just natural to have Hyung 동생 relationship.
Yeah.
Because as a person who is desperately clinging on to this part of our culture, wherever I can find it, I really appreciate it.
Wow.
There are people,
Yeah.
Korean Americans,
Yeah.
who don't particularly like it when they
Yeah.
receive that 동생 energy from me.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there are people who kind of just want it to be we're peers.
I got you.
Yeah,
Wow.
or even it's kind of odd too, because in Korea it's straight up if you are a year from the previous year, born in the previous sun, I guess.
Yeah.
You are my Hyung.
Right.
But here we've kind of diluted it to, well, you have to be at least 2 or 3 years older for me to call you Hyung.
The rules have changed.
Yeah, it's again, but it's not like a definitive rule that we've set.
So therefore, it's hard to navigate.
Super hard to navigate.
It's interesting, David, is, first and foremost, just feedback to what you're saying. I would even say this on a practical note, right? Is I would say if this podcast is, percolating something in you, to be honest, I don't think the form really matters, right? I would say function over form. So you don't, like, if it's awkward to call someone Hyung, that's fine. Or if it's awkward to whatever, right?
No, but the thing is, it's not awkward. I prefer it.
Right.
I just don't want to put that person in an awkward place.
Right. Well, I mean, with you, I think it's a unique case, but I would say maybe for others who may be listening, it's like, yeah, I jive with this, I want this, but like it's for what reason, it's like to start using the word Hyung would feel awkward, right?
Right.
So I would say maybe for that person, I would say, you know what, just you do the function or use the energy first, right? And just see what comes about that. But I also wanted to say this because when you said you were like, it's hard for you to navigate, bro, it's hard for me to navigate. And this is stuff that my older brother and we talk about a lot, right? Because real quick, my older brother, who's born in the early 80s, me who was born in the mid 80s, it's interesting to even say this, but here in Atlanta, I would say my brother's generation was very immersed in Hyung culture. And my brother used to say this to me. He was like, you Shekider? No, I'm just kidding. He would be like, you guys, like your generation, he's like, I feel like you guys were the last.
Wow.
Because he says, I can feel like after you, like especially going into the 90s, he was just like, what the heck, right? Like, right? He definitely couldn't see it.
Yeah.
So we talk about this stuff just for fun, but I will say this. You express your difficulty of navigating. Dude, I have had so many instances where this has been difficult to navigate. And here's what I'll say without taking too much time. The same way for you, like I naturally, my default, because I know what it is to be a Hyung. Like I have a younger brother, and I would even say, at one point in time, I actually had a lot of dongsengs, and it was, I loved to do that. I loved to have those relationships, but as time progressed, I would run into some of these Korean Americans that again, my default was to kind of engage in that kind of Hyung culture.
Yeah.
Again, not to dominate, not at all, actually. Quite the opposite. But what I would quickly notice was that they didn't understand what was going on the other side. And that created a lot of conflict too.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? And that caused a lot of misunderstanding, and I'll just call that for what it is. So I just wanted to chime in because just as much as there was difficulty navigating on your end, it's similar for me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think the solution is? Because
Yeah.
my preference
Yeah.
is Hyung culture being preserved.
Sure.
But if the majority of our community is rejecting it,
Right.
then I don't have the power to cling on to it, right? Because
It's almost like a sinking ship.
yeah, and Hyung culture, it's without the community, it really means nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
That's very true.
I can treat as many dongsengs as I want as dongsengs and as many Hyungs as Hyungs.
Yeah.
But if they don't understand what that is, if they're rejecting it,
Yeah.
then whatever effort I exert on my end
Sure.
is meaningless. Well, to a degree.
Yeah. I know.
There's a little bit of value, I
Yeah,
think, but
yeah.
to a degree, it's very diluted in what it's the potential of the
Yes.
meaning that it has, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, I guess this is a question that really can't be answered, but should we as a community accept that it's deteriorating?
Yeah.
Or should we try to galvanize some people around us and say, hey, let's try to prop this part of our heritage up?
Well, I think this hence comes the collective conversation, right? Or even collective consciousness around it. I mean, I don't know. I would just say this, and this is totally me. Like, I'm obviously not an expert on it. I'm just a person who's giving their opinion, But I would say this. I would say if you're listening to this, right? My question to you would be, or my first question would be, is there a desire to really embrace at a deeper level your native culture? That'd be question number one. Question number two, if you are Korean, or even maybe if you're not, but if you are Korean, my question would be, what do you actually really think about Hyung, Oppa, Nuna culture? And do you even want to attempt to see the beauty of it, right? Oftentimes we don't do anything because it's not even in our consciousness.
Yeah.
So just even asking the question may be important, number two, right? And I would say number three would be this. If you come to the conclusion that this is something that matters to you or is special to you, and there are people in your life that you actually want to engage, because honestly, this conversation means nothing until it becomes experiential, right? So if there are people in your life that maybe you are kind of in this gray space of being like, I don't know if I have a Hyung relationship or a Dongseng relationship with this person, I would say, if you've answered 1 and 2, maybe step 3 or question 3 would be, would you be willing to even have conversations specifically around this? Because I think the power of conversation, right? The fact that you could even engage and talk about it, it's going to sound weird, but it's almost like a DTR, right? It's almost like a defining the relationship. And I think if we're able to do that almost at a critical mass level, then I think you can actually start to move the consciousness a little bit.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Then in that light, I want to spend a few minutes then kind of explaining what the beauty of Hyung culture looks like when it's done right. So
Sure.
I'll give one example.
Please.
I am one of the older people at my church.
Okay.
And so just because it's a Korean American church, there's naturally just this oppa, hyung culture there already. And there was one time we were all hanging at a cafe and a car hit one of my dongseng's cars in the parking lot. And so she had to go out and try to deal with that.
Okay.
But she didn't really know how to do it. So a few moments later, she comes back and she goes, David Oppa, can you come out and help me?
Yeah.
So I'm not a traffic expert.
Right.
I don't know the laws of, what happens when people hit other people's cars. But the fact that she had someone to turn to in that situation, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I was willing. As like, Oppa, I was willing to say, hey, I don't really know what to do in this situation either, but let me go out there with you and I'll try to help you in any way that I can.
Right.
And because she was a female,
Yeah.
there's that, like we talked about it a little earlier, there was this kind of protective,
Sure.
relationship. So yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted her not to have to, talk to strangers without really understanding what's going on, or
Yeah.
talk to police
Yeah.
without really understanding what's going on, right? So
Yeah.
I just used the little bit more life experience that I had
Yeah.
to go to her aid.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, a
That's
beautiful
beautiful.
example, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any examples that?
Yeah. I mean, even going back to what I said about, my experience with my older brother, I mean, yeah, I think that would be a kind of a picture immediately. But yeah, I mean, I would just say this. I would say, you know, when you have older, I'll speak from this perspective of a 동생 now,
Okay.
because you did one from the older, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think when you have older people in your life, and this is kind of side note but funny, I have actually African American Hyungs. As this sounds
Oh.
really funny, but I legitimately do.
Huh.
And I have white Hyungs too, right? Shout out Billy Humphrey, you're my white Hyung, okay? But I'll just say this, but because I think it's more transcendent, right? But going back to what I was saying, I think when you're a younger person and you have older people in your life, I really feel like you become a beneficiary of their care, and honestly, even at times their life wisdom. Honestly,
Yes.
like I can think of for myself personally, okay? I'm just getting uber real. Like like I have a set of Hyungs, but one or two Hyungs in particular who really, really, really helped me through some super challenging times in my life. And for time's sake, I'm not going to go into detail with it, but I mean, I was just going through some internal stuff, you know what I mean? And figuring myself out, whether it was kind of reoccurring patterns of things that were happening that I didn't really like or were even hurting me or hurting relationships. I had these two Hyungs that I really love and I trust. And I really actually I engaged them and I invited them to speak into my life. I said, I need someone who's a little bit wiser. I need someone to actually tell me what's up.
Yeah.
Like, because that's the point that I was getting, right? And I would actually say this is the part that actually kind of hurts me, or like it breaks my heart sometimes, is when I see 동생's continue to kind of go through life and reject this. I mean, for all intents and purposes, really out of whether it's like pride or
Right.
whether it's self-sufficiency or self-preservation, it just kind of makes me sad,
Yeah.
honestly, because I see it and I'm just like, yo, like it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so I would just say that maybe that's not just like a picture example, but that would be an example for me
Yeah.
of some really powerful benefits. And I even shout out some of these people on my website, right? Quick plug, andyeun.com, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I write about these, these figures in my life that have had this indelible mark on my life, and some of those Hyungs are in there. You know what I mean? And I really honor them because I'm just like, man, without you, I genuinely would not be who I am today.
Yeah. And you remember when we were at Jonathan Choi's house several weeks back, or several months back?
Yep.
There were, kind of the younger couples and
Yep.
the older couples, and
Yep.
you guys very humbly said, "Hey, let us pray for you. Let us honor you guys."
Yeah.
That was a really beautiful moment for me, and a shining example of Hyung culture.
Wow.
You guys kind of taking on this. Hey, we come before you guys.
Yeah.
Because it was in the context of church ministry,
Right.
and you guys were saying we've done it, longer than you, but it's not about us trying to lord it over you guys
No,
or trying
not
to
at
tell
all.
you guys what to do.
No.
Is you guys are super like humble and super raw, real, and
Yeah.
you guys individually kind of prayed for us, and
Yeah.
that's that intersection. That's, I mean, Christianity you think of as more Western,
Sure.
and this Eastern philosophy.
Right.
That was an example for me where it came at a head, and there
Wow.
was like harmony.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, David, that was beautiful. Yeah, no, I mean, actually I don't have anything more to say to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I remember that night, and yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was. Yeah.
And so this is my actual plea to the people. I hope Korean Americans hear this and say, you know, this Hyung culture that if you've been rejecting it,
Yeah.
I think there's so much beauty that maybe you're blind to, you haven't seen or witnessed.
Yeah.
Because the more Hyungs there are, the more benefits the Dongzens can receive from that. Like you were talking about, so much of Hyung culture is the Hyungs imparting life wisdom onto the younger
Sure.
generation or people, right?
And I would just even inject this too, because I have to, but I would even say it's love. Like I
Yeah.
would say even on the part of if you do call yourself a Hyung, then I would just even, check that person or us and say like, yeah, we have it's a call to love. Yeah. I
yeah.
just want to say that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 And yeah, if there are a lot of people out there saying, I'm willing to be Hyungs or I'm willing to be Dongsangs,
Yeah.
that mix, oh man, I can only imagine how beautiful it would be. Yeah.
Bro, you're this is awesome, David. I'm so glad we did this
Yeah.
this podcast. Yeah.
And to touch on something you talked about, you also said it could be a gift that we impart onto the world. Right?
Yes.
I really believe that.
Come on.
I think if us as Korean Americans can really demonstrate and show what Hong culture looks like,
Yeah.
I think there are people out there who would see the value in it and want to, take a part of that and put it into their Western culture, right?
Again, I'm totally not giving myself another, I'm not inviting myself again, but if you ever wanted to do a follow up on this, I believe that as Korean people, our two greatest gifts to the world is Han and Jung. Han, if you don't know what Han is, go look it up, right? Some people would call it a sense of suffering, but suffering that has produced character. And then Chung being again, this nearness, this bond, right? But I personally believe that our two greatest gifts that are actually in our blood, it's actually flowing through our veins as people, I would say would be Han and Chung.
Wow.
And I think if we can extrapolate that and we can articulate that, I really believe that wherever we go, we can almost shine that gift to the world. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So as we close out, I actually want to have the DTR conversation with you on the podcast.
Wow.
So we talked about,
Yeah.
and you know what it is? It's because I'm just a really introverted, shy guy. I would never be able to do this if it weren't for the mics here.
Sure.
And this being a podcast.
Yeah.
So can we define our relationship as a Hyung Dongsaeng relationship?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm going to start calling you Hyung from now on.
Oh, shoot, bro. Dang, I just felt weird for a second. Not because it's awkward, but yeah, bro. I mean, again, David, like, I think this is so awesome that we're even demonstrating it. But like, even for me, the moment you just said that, like, I felt a sense of, if I'm even may say this, like holy responsibility. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'm honored. That's what I want to say. I'm honored. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great thing that we're able to do this.
Yeah.
And I encourage people out there to do the same. And again, this is really, we didn't talk about this. I just kind of said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do this DTR. And that's what we got out of it.
Wow.
Right. So yeah, it's just an encouragement to people listening who are kind of in the same place as me.
Yeah.
That awkward, hard to navigate the Hyung culture state.
Yeah.
Just go out and see what kind of Hyung relationships you can cultivate. Because you never know. Yeah, right. So if anything we talked about, or actually, sorry, before that, is there anything you wanted to add on the topic?
Bro, this was awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So if any of the things that we talked about resonated with you, if you want to continue this conversation about the validity or the value that Hyung culture can bring, please feel free to reach out at IHTHT@gmail.com. I hope they hear this, podcast@gmail.com, or on Twitter at IHTHT podcast, or on Instagram at I hope they hear this. I would love to continue this conversation. And you talked about coming on for a second podcast.
A fourth time.
Fourth time, I would love to have you on.
I would love that, bro. That'd be awesome.
And I think this is also an example of kind of how you've demonstrated being a Hyung even before we defined it. Because whenever I reached out, you said, "Hey, let's do it."
Absolutely.
And you were so willing and always wanting to help out with the podcast. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much for that. I'm really grateful.
Yes.
Yes. So thank you again for being on.
Yes.
Thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
God bless.
Bye.